Hello everyone, I'm Paul Bertorelli reporting for AVweb and Aviation Consumer with just one teensy question for Johnny Ive. Johnny Ive, by the way, is the chief designer at Apple. I'm just wondering if it's possible to produce a small tablet computer whose screen isn't as reflective as a signaling mirror. Because if it is, Apple very nearly has a perfect cockpit accessory in the new Mini. Now the Mini's been out there for about a month. We've flown with it, we've used it for pre-flight planning, and now it's time to take a closer look at it, starting with the numbers. When the original iPad was introduced, it earned a strong following among pilots. Some of us used it like a kneeboard, while others preferred yoke mounts. A few brave souls stuck it up on the glare shield. After all, how much traffic can really be out there? The iPad's large screen size is a plus for some using it in the cockpit, but a nuisance for those who find it just a little too big. The Mini solves that problem. It's basically about 2/3 the size of the iPad in surface area, and because the screen bezel edges are narrow compared to the iPad, the Mini maximizes its display area. Besides being smaller in area, the Mini is also shallower or thinner. It measures only 0.28 inch deep compared to the iPad's 0.34 inch. That doesn't sound like much, but it's noticeable, especially when you consider that the Mini weighs only 10.8 ounces, less than half the weight of the original. If you own an original iPad or an iPad 2, the Mini is really nothing but the second generation technology shrunk down to a smaller size. It has the same dual-core A5 processor and the same 1024 by 768 screen resolution. It was hoped that the Mini would have the new Retina display from Apple, which is higher resolution, but it doesn't. So if you want the higher resolution display, you're going to have to buy the iPad with Retina, which is both larger and costs about 1/3 more. So let's take the Mini to the pilot lounge and see how it does with a pre-flight briefing. Now there's no question that the Mini is at a slight disadvantage when getting a briefing. The screen is smaller and the display is smaller, so that means graphics and type are smaller too, so they're not as easy to read. Take a look at these winds aloft charts from ForeFlight on the iPad here and on the Mini here. Pin scaling helps, but not everything scales equally, and some things don't scale at all. Here's what a full-size plate looks like on the iPad, and here it is on the Mini. You can see the size difference is noticeable, but both will scale to any size you want, and with the Mini, having it on the yoke close to your eyes might make it readable in full aspect for pilots with above-average eyesight. And then there's the screen glare. You might as well get used to it because it's hard to fix. We put an anti-glare screen on this Mini, and although it helps, glare is still an issue, especially with off-center viewing. And speaking of yoke mounts, the yoke mount for the Mini is really quite small, so you can see it has a real advantage in the cockpit. Although some people do mount the iPad on the yoke, it takes up a lot more space. It's just a larger unit. Now you can also mount the Mini on a suction cup mount, shown here, and you can put that on a window on either side of the cockpit.
As you can see, the iPad Mini is just a whole lot friendlier on the yoke than the full-size iPad is. In some cases, you can't even get the full-size iPad on the yoke. The information is just as viewable, it's just as bright, with one exception. If you're not familiar with the app you're using, the screen icons will occasionally be too small to see, and you might have to squint a bit to see what you're doing in certain light conditions. So the bottom line here is at a $329 entry price, plus you'll need another $100 for a remote GPS, say like the Garmin Glow we're using here. The Mini really represents the best value in small cockpit displays yet, although the Android 7-inch displays are certainly competitive, and we'll take a look at those in a future issue. For the time being, you can find a full review on the iPad Mini in the January 2013 issue of Aviation Consumer. For Aviation Consumer, I'm Paul Bertorelli reporting. Thanks for watching, and thanks to Richard Francis for doing the flying.